A new pilot project this year will see American border officers deployed on Canadian soil and vice versa. The Canadian Border Services Agency says the move is aimed at streamlining movement across the border, but it's also raising questions about whose laws would apply and what it means for your rights. So joining us with a closer look at this plan is public safety analyst Chris Lewis. Good to have you here this morning, Chris.
Good morning, Anne-Marie.
So this, is a reminder to everybody, is a pilot project. It could start as early as June, and it involves a small border crossing at Covey Hill and Cannon Corners, where New York meets Quebec. So walk us through the process. What will change when people cross the border there?
Well, it's an interesting extension of what's been going on at Canadian airports, the larger airports like Toronto and Ottawa, et cetera, for some years, where American officers have been situated in the airport, so you're pre-cleared. And once you get off the plane in whatever American city, you don't have to go through customs. You've already done that. So it's the same principle, just happening on land. And so there's a variety of training and policy and legal issues to sort out that I'm sure they're working on. But in essence, when you pull up at the American side, coming towards Canada, you would meet Canadian customs officers who would pre-clear you. So do all what they normally do on the Canadian side, but on the U.S. side, so there'd be less bottlenecks that really at the Canadian side as trucks and, thousands of people a day are crossing into Canada.
Timing is everything with these projects. Why now? What's the purpose?
I don't really know the exact reason they're doing it now. I mean, obviously, it's going to take some time to sort out the pilot, analyze that, make changes, and then start implementing it in other centers, some of which may or may not have the physical ability to do it on the American side, depending on the structures of their buildings and on and on. But, there's still dangerous goods coming into Canada every day. So anything they can do to prevent handguns and fentanyl and people that have been trafficked, human trafficking issues from coming into Canada, it's all a good thing. So, I applaud CBSA for taking the step, and it's probably going to be a much better situation for many as time goes on.
There's two conversations that are had when we talk about the border. One has to do with crime, which you just mentioned. The other has to do with immigration, migration, and asylum seeking. Is that, given that we're having more increased conversations around that, could that be part of the reason for this pilot project?
It likely is. I haven't seen the analysis around the why. They've just kind of announced in simple terms that they're doing it. But undoubtedly, it's going to make the system more effective. So if someone's seeking asylum, they're seeking asylum on the Canadian or on the U.S. side to come into Canada, easier to turn them around than once they're in Canadian soil on the other side of the bridge. So that's certainly one issue, but anything to kind of tighten the noose around those more dangerous goods like fentanyl and handguns, which are still a scourge in Canadian municipalities across the country, that's a good thing. So tighten the noose, really more of a bottleneck to try and keep goods out.
Chris, a major sticking point, and you and I have spoken about this a couple times. Remember back to trying to reopen the Nexus offices, and a big issue was Canada, was whether American officers could be in Canada and be armed, because our border crossing officials are not. So for this pilot project, what is the plan for firearms for American Border Service agents on the Canadian side of the border?
A great question, and they will be armed. Canadian land border officers are armed, and they have been for a number of years. But they're really not armed in the airports except under certain circumstances. So it made it difficult to then arm American customs officers in Canadian airports. But the land issue is simple. They're armed on both sides of the border now, so this step shouldn't change that at all. And that's also a good thing in terms of the web around Canada to keep Canada safer.
Many people's minds go to rights. So if you are dealing with a U.S. officer, but while you're still on Canadian soil, which country's laws apply?
Canadian laws apply for everything but customs and immigration issues. So the American customs and immigration laws will apply to someone trying to get into the States through the Canadian border, and vice versa. But if it's an impaired driver, a stolen car, a drug seizure, still federal, I suppose, so that would remain as is. But those other laws that may be violated, they find stolen property, stolen cars, and wanted people all the time on both sides of the border. So those laws will apply depending on the soil. And so the police would still be brought in as they are now.
I guess my mind goes to what if the request is to search somebody's vehicle? And in Canada, presumably you know your rights. But if it's an American officer asking to search my vehicle and I don't know what the American laws are, what do you do in a situation like that?
Just follow the instructions of the officer. Otherwise, they'll just turn you around. So if you really want to get into Canada, you're dealing with a Canadian officer on American soil, then Canadian officers will say yay or nay, depending on how you act. And the same thing in reverse, coming the other direction.
All right, Chris Lewis, good to have some clarification around this. I know it's a ways away starting in June, but good to take a look. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Have a great day.
You too.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.